Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Let's Talk, the show where basically I talk about other things I do besides my readings. And hopefully you guys like it. Nobody's said anything against it, so we're going to go with another one. Today we're going to talk about it's a combination of an art piece and a story I wrote for a contest. It was the Unexpected Meeting contest. And so I guess the first thing we're going to establish is that you're going to see two variations of the image on here, because one thing I wanted to try out was this idea of like having the image move on the screen, so it's not just, oh hey, he's talking and there's an image on the screen, that's it. It's like the image might move a bit from time to time. So I did that, and then I later ended up editing the image. So you're going to see one variation where it moves and one where it doesn't, and the one where it doesn't is the actual finished product. Because what ends up happening, if you're like me, is you work on something, and you work on it, and then you come back later, and you're like, you know what? I think I could do this, and it'll look a lot better. And so that's what ended up happening. Is I thought I had it done, and I was like, okay, I'm going to make this moving image, and then it'll be so cool when I finally get around to talking about this. But that did not. That basically I ended up adding more to it. So, to be clear, there's going to be spoilers for my story, which is, the story is called, Does This Count as a Crossover? And it's kind of meant to be a bit of a meta joke. Someone pointed it out in the comments on my story, and I was like, yeah, it's kind of meant to be like that. So I guess I should probably talk about like what the point behind the contest was. So the Unexpected Meeting contest was basically to take characters who normally wouldn't interact with each other and have them, well, interact with each other. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do. And originally Mane-iac had nothing to do with it. Originally, it was just going to be Marble Pie, who eventually I will get around to. I will eventually write a fic with her involved. I just haven't found a good excuse to use her, because she's admittedly a hard character to use. She doesn't talk in the show hardly at all. I think, in fact, the only thing she does is And I've heard one fic where she talks, and it's very little. It was a fic that Obed Scribbler read, and I can't remember what it's called, but it was like a Christmas sort of Krampus themed one. It was really cool. Go check that out. I won't, I'll probably put a link for that in the description below, as well as a link to the story. So if you want to read the story, you can go look at that. So originally it was going to be Marble Pie, and then I was like, what would be the most unlikely character to pair her with? I was like, why not Ahuizotl? Ahuizotl's a pretty cool guy. Not much out there aside, story-wise for him, aside from occasionally fics where he works with a whole bunch of the other villains, or stories where it's just him and Daring Do. And so I was like, okay, I think he deserves his own unique story. He deserves a story with somebody else. So I was originally going to do it with him and Marble Pie, but I couldn't think of a logical reason to have them come together. Now, admittedly, you can probably think of a few, and it's one of those things where, like, I'm done with the project, and now I can think of a few where it's like, oh, maybe there's a magical relic on the farm that nobody knows about, except for Ahuizotl, and so then Ahuizotl meets Marble Pie and all that. So but that did not come to mind at the time I was writing it. So I was like, okay, what do I do? And I was like, I was already having a hard time enough with Marble Pie, and I was like, maybe I'll try to do Ahuizotl with a different character. And so then the idea was like, this crazy idea came up to mind. Was like, what if I did it with Sonata Dusk? Now, for those who don't know, Sonata Dusk is a villain, sort of, in the second Equestria Girls movie. And I was very much dreading it, because I liked the character, but I'm not a big Equestria Girl fan. I'm not a big fan. I'm pretty sure most of you aren't big fans of it either. Not a big fan of it, and I wasn't really excited about it. So there was some, I threw the idea around. I got started on it, and then I was like, I don't know what it was. I think I was looking up something, and I can't remember what it was. And then Mane-iac showed up, and I was like, Mane-iac's kind of a cool character. I want to write a fic about her at some point. Oh no, now I remember what it was. So in the previous contest, there was a pairing. I was part of a pairing contest. For those of you who don't know, I've actually been part of 2 pairing contests. Well, technically 3, though 2 of which were randomized pairing contests. The first being Trixie and Filthy Rich, which you can read about in my story, Tricks, Treats, and Snakes. If I remember that, I believe it's what I called it. And then there was a sequel to that where I actually did another pairing. And it was a different contest, but it was like the same contest owner, and it was Bonbon and Big Mac. And so that's what I ended up doing. Although I went by the name Sweetie Drops in that one because Bonbon just gets really boring after a while hearing that over and over again. So during that, I saw someone else got the pairing of the Flim Flam Brothers and Mane-iac, and I was like, that would be kind of cool. And I really had wished I got that one, but I didn't. And I think what happened was I went back because the contest got extended because I was one of the few people who entered that contest right around the time I started entering the unexpected meeting contest. And I was like, I should totally do one with not Big Mac, Mane-iac. And so then I was like, well, what if I paired Mane-iac with Ahuizotl? I looked it up. I think there was like maybe one fic where they're like supposedly paired together. I don't know how accurate that is. But I was like, a fic with just these two, with dynamics based around these two. And so that was the idea. And so I basically established, like the second day in, that was going to be my pairing. It was going to be not Big Mac. Why am I thinking Big Mac? Curse you, Big Mac! Mane-iac and Ahuizotl, and those were the 2 that were going to be together for the story. And I didn't want to necessarily be romance, but maybe establish that it could eventually become romance. It was kind of the idea. And I wanted to do some world building because there isn't a lot, obviously there's not a lot on Metropolis, and we don't really know much about Ahuizotl either. In fact, when it comes to Mane-iac and Ahuizotl, I would say they're pretty much underrated villains. And they're good villains to an extent. I know some people are like probably annoyed with Ahuizotl because it's like, oh hey, he was this fictional character, but no, he's actually a real character we established in the fic. So immediately that kind of probably annoyed people a bit with him. But so I decided to do that, and it was funny because during the time I was trying to make sure that I wasn't like that nobody else had done this. So I looked up both. I looked up both pictures and stories where Ahuizotl and Mane-iac are paired together. I can say, basically recall seeing pictures with Mane-iac and Ahuizotl together, and count them on my hand. Because there's technically five, although 4 if you don't count the one that I drew for the story. And out of them, only 2 of them are actually with them romantically involved. Which you might say, okay, big deal. Well, the only reason I make a big deal out of this is because when I was trying to look this up, somebody had posted a blog apparently on their DeviantArt. Now, I'm not going to say who, because 1, I don't remember the name, and 2, because I don't want him to feel bad. But basically, he had this list of ships he hated, and on there was Mane-iac and Ahuizotl, and I was like, how can you hate a ship that hasn't even been established? That's like saying, hey, I hate crossovers between Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and... Oh, I had an example and I can't remember what it was now. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Shoot. I had a good example for this. I had an example set up for this. If it comes back to me, I'll bring it up. But basically, it's like saying, hey, I hate this one crossover, but the crossover doesn't exist. It's like, how can you hate something that doesn't exist? When you haven't even... It's like saying, I've never had frozen yogurt, and I hate frozen yogurt. It's like, you haven't even had it. How do you know if you like it or not? You can't say. So yeah, it was pretty much that. One of the so I guess let's talk about the characters. That should be something we should probably talk about that. So I wanted to, of course, establish them as I wanted to add more to these characters because there isn't really anything established much for these characters. What's Ahuizotl? He is this creature based off of Aztec mythology, also referred to as an Ahuizotl. And there's also a king, apparently a Mayan king called Ahuizotl, or maybe it's an Aztec king, who named himself Ahuizotl after the creature. But aside from that, he's basically this big blue creature in the show who just wants to steal relics and apparently has this desire to bring suffering to this one section of Equestria. Not all of Equestria, just this one tiny section. And so it's like, why would he care so much about this one spot? And why does he go to all these links to get these relics that really only affect this one location? It's like, it doesn't make too much sense. And so that's why I wanted to establish a story for him. And so I had this idea that's like, maybe the idea was like, maybe he's the last of his kind, which I kind of stuck with, but I talked to some people and we sort of swapped ideas around a bit for it. And it was this idea that like maybe the people of this location had killed off his family, and so he's the last of his kind. So it's this like quest for revenge/vengeance. And while it kind of still sticks around to that, as you can read in the story, that changed. The idea is he's a bit more like Superman now, where the idea is that he basically appeared one day from somewhere. I'm thinking from an alternate dimension. Like, I'm thinking, and I'm going to say this, and we'll see if this idea goes, but the idea being that maybe Ahuizotl is part of a species called Ahuizotl, and what they do is they move between dimensions, and they enslave worlds, or something like that. And what they do is they leave an offspring on a planet, and which they establish through these portals that are like in the water. Which kind of goes back to the fact that Ahuizotl is, in Aztec mythology, the thorn in the water. And it's called that because it basically looks like this thorny creature, this thorny dog that can move through the water and drags people into the water to eat to eat various organs such as eyes, fingernails, teeth, really weird stuff. And so the idea was like, maybe this had happened, but this couple had taken him in, and then he kind of grew up secretly, kind of like Moses, you might say. And then ultimately the tribes found out, they're like, we can't have this. And so they killed his family, but he survived. And so maybe something has happened as a result, by basically having this loving connection with these ponies. He isn't necessarily as blood hungry as the rest of his species. So that's kind of the general idea for him. We'll see if more. That's another thing I would make this clear. I would like to expand more upon this concept, but it's like, it gets so discouraging when you put down a story and you get like maybe 5 likes and like 3 dislikes, and you're like, what? I don't feel like writing more about this concept. And so it would be nice. And so here's the thing: if you like the story and you want to see more, please give it a like, on FimFiction. Because like I said in there, if I reach 25 plus likes, I will reopen the story. I will add more. I will expand upon it. But to get back to Ahuizotl, so in the actual lore, Ahuizotl is this dog. It's basically a dog, is what it is in the lore. It's a dog with a hand at the end of its tail, and it grabs people, drags them into the water, and basically eats them. And so that's one of the reasons why you might look at the art on the front and go, that doesn't look quite like Ahuizotl. That looks more like a jackal. And that's because, to an extent, it is. I like, when it comes to dogs, I like the dogs with that jackal look. And I thought, and the idea was, maybe because originally the concept, to make this clear, was originally, when I was going with the concept of it being Sonata Dusk, the idea is that he would be sucked into the Equestria Girls universe, and he would be turned into a dog. That was the original concept. And I decided, I really liked that concept, so I wanted to keep it. And I was like, well, how do I have this make sense? So he's a dog, but he looks so different in the My Little Pony universe, Equestria, as opposed to the Metropolis. How does he look different? And so the idea is that he's kind of like Tyrek. The idea is that his species is like the centaurs, that they can absorb magic, and when they do, they go through this metamorphosis and they change and they like sort of adapt. And so, how you see Tarek grow into this giant creature, the idea is that it's similar to Ahuizotl, but the idea is that he starts off with this dog-like form with a hand on his tail, and then he gradually grows into the creature we see in the show, and maybe even beyond that, even to a more godlike state, which is kind of the concept behind the story. It's the reason he went through the portal to begin with is because he's trying to reach this god state to basically achieve vengeance on these people who killed off the family he knew at the time. And so, but during the process of him going through the portal, he gets robbed of this magic. And like I said, I'm more than willing to expand upon the concept because I have ideas of what took the magic and all that. But it's like, I would kind of like to see if people even want to see this. If people care enough, I'll write more. If people don't, then I'll work on different projects that I want to do. There's no point in working on something you don't want to do. So that was that's kind of the main reason why he has a sort of different appearance in the story and in the on the picture. So now that we've talked about Ahuizotl, let's talk about Mane-iac. Well, there's a couple things about Mane-iac. Let's first start talking about like what were my inspirations for Mane-iac, because a lot of people when they look at Mane-iac, they're like the Joker, and really the only reason I think they connect the Joker with the Mane-iac is one, the green hair, two, all the laughter, and the fact that his origin is roughly the same origin as hers, is that he fell into a vat of some liquid and he became the Joker. Because originally he was supposed to be the Red Hood. But so for me, it's like, while that certainly is true, there's actually, I find quite a lot of similarities between her and Dr. Octopus. And it's like, with Dr. Octopus, for one thing, it's like the tentacle mane. It's like, it moves in a similar manner that you see Dr. Octopus's tentacles move in a lot of these, in some of these animations, and especially in the movie. Was it a bad movie? It was kind of a mad movie, but it was, it's like you see it move, and it's like very much like an octopus, and so it's, to me, it's like, okay, there's a connection there. And then she makes inventions. And assuming that she makes an invention for every encounter that we see in the show, that every encounter that she has with the Power Ponies, then she's almost like Dr. Octopus. Because Dr. Octopus does quite a few, you see often in the show, he will make some invention, like the Octobots and stuff like that. And in this situation, she created a giant hairdryer that will make people's manes pretty much like hers and go insane. And that's kind of her deal. And so I pretty much was like, okay, there's a few other things too. In fact, if you look at her suit color, and I know some people are going to say her suit color is nothing like Dr. Octopus, and it's like, it depends, because there are Dr. Octopus suits where it is green and purple. And admittedly, it's more green than purple, but then she has that connection of having a purplish suit. So there's a couple of different connections. And so what I'm going to say is, technically she's a mashup of multiple supervillains, but I really like her as a Dr. Octopus, kind of. And the idea that there's this, that her mane is somewhat sentient, and that maybe it talks to her, and maybe she's developed a personality for it. And so that's why, in my story, the character is Mabel Mane, which is actually a joking reference. Originally, I was like, okay, what name should I give her? Because I wanted to give her two names. I wanted to establish two personalities. I wanted to establish just one that's more sane, and then I wanted to establish the Mane-iac, which is the more insane personality. And I kind of wanted to establish that and have this idea that they're aware of each other and things. And I was like, what should the character be called? And for some reason, I was thinking like, well, shampoo and makeup and stuff like that. And I was like, the old commercial, like maybe she's born with it, maybe she's Maybelline, came to mind. And I was like, Mabel Mane. It's perfect. I later ended up finding out that Maybelline is more of a makeup company and not a shampoo company. But I was like, yeah, I like it. I like Mabel Mane. I think Mabel Mane's a good name for her. So I gave her the name Mabel Mane. And so the idea is like you have sort of these two personalities. They're kind of work in with each other / against each other, because the idea is that Mabel has seen the city of Metropolis becoming corrupt. Because at least the way I interpret Metropolis is a bit like Gotham. It's like you have good people trying to save the city, and then you have a lot of bad people who are in control and are in power. And it's like so it's like you have people trying to deal with that in their own ways. And the idea is like Mabel Mane she was trying to fight this, then the Crimson Fist, and like I said, if you haven't read the story, you're spoiler territory. The Crimson Fist, who is working for one of the villains, ends up basically throwing her into the vat. She was thrown into the vat as opposed to falling into the vat. In my story, which is one reason why I get alternate universe tag, because technically it doesn't say that one way or the other. It just shows her her falling in. But so I'm saying that she was thrown in, and so she's thrown in by the Crimson Fist, and the Mane-iac. She almost dies, and in the process, the Mane-iac is born basically, and it basically is like, hey, there's this, the city is corrupt. Let's just destroy it and start over. That's the Mane-iac's concept. And Mabel, she wants to destroy the corruption. She's not necessarily all up with destroying the city, but she's kind of, she'll do what she has to if necessary. But at the point in the story that I was establishing, the idea is like, she just wants to take a break from it. She's already been in jail once. She doesn't really want to go back in right now. And so she basically is leaving. The people are supposedly, you have the medical people at this prison complex trying to tell her that it's like you need these pills to suppress the Mane-iac, and the idea, and admittedly it's some concept, because at one point she apparently misses out on some of the pills, and the Mane-iac starts talking to her, and it's like the pills aren't gonna stop me. The pills just basically repress the memories that gave birth to me and all this stuff. And so it's like, so the idea is like, is the Mane-iac really the bad guy, or is the pills really supposed to stop the Mane-iac, or are the pills something established by maybe this corrupt government that's trying to basically stop the truth from coming out? And so it's basically trying. So that's kind of the concept with that. What else should I talk about? We get to the part of the show where Robbie is like, I think I'm done with my notes. I don't think I have anything else to add. Oh, I guess one thing I should talk about too is one thing that should be established in this story is that the descriptions for the power ponies I went for are actually from the comic. I didn't take them from the episode because I wanted to establish this idea that while the story that took place in that episode is like part of this book that takes place in its own universe, and the idea is that it has its own universe, and it's kind of established that in a way the characters aren't the power ponies. Twilight isn't the masked Matterhorn, because if you look at Spike's reaction, Spike is kind of like, you are the power ponies. And it's like, if they had actually like the power ponies, wouldn't have Spike pointed it out and said, hey, these power ponies, they actually look very similar to some of you guys. If he had, showed the comment to Twilight at the beginning. Granted, someone could say, well, that was just a writer's block on their part or something like that. But then we have the comic, and the comic shows them with different colors. Some of them are similar, but they're still different. And so I have been going off the idea that it uses the comic, the annual, as the inspiration for them, and so that's a part of that. And that reminds me, so to address chapter 3, you may notice that there are, when it comes to some of the villains, there are a few villains that are technically OCs. And it should be noted that originally the Mad Clown Gang, which is supposed to be a joke reference to the Insane Clown Posse band, which I haven't really heard their music, but I heard there's some stuff about them. But anyway, so you have with the Mad Clown Gang, the idea originally it wasn't the Mad Clown Gang. Originally, it was gonna be Pharaoh Flintlock from the comic, and it was gonna be his mummies. I just really didn't, but I went through it, and it's funny because I talked to I had 7-Eleven proofreading, which I probably should have opened up with. By the way, 7-Eleven proofread the story. He did a really great job. I know he's probably already heard me say this before, but I'm really glad he helped me out with the story. So before I'd even given him chapter 3, I had written chapter 3, and ultimately I did not like the way I did it. I didn't like how I didn't like Pharaoh Flintlock all that much. I didn't like his mummies all that much. And I didn't like the scene very much. So I ended up changing it. And so I ended up basically I took him out. I took them out. I basically changed it to this idea of this other gang, and this idea of maybe trying to establish more, the idea to do more world building, because who doesn't love more world building? And so that was pretty much what I did there with that. And I guess that's pretty much it. That's all I can really think about for this Let's Talk. I wrote down some notes. I've pretty much mentioned everything I wanted to talk about. So I guess the only other thing is I'll just remind you guys, if you want to see more of Ahuizotl and Mane-iac working together, maybe even developing a romantic relationship, which I have actually considered the idea of, just say, hey, Robbie, here's a like on your story. Write more. Because like I said, if I get 25 plus likes, that's 25 or more likes, I'll write more. I'll say, hey, you guys like it? I'll either change the stats of the story from complete to incomplete and add more chapters, or I'll do a new story. I'll do a sequel, if you will, and I will have the characters going forward. I'm more than willing to do that. But I just want to, it's like I said, it's very discouraging to write something and then be like, nobody likes it. Nobody, and I know not all of you are like that. I know I've seen quite a few people favorite my stories, and admittedly, it's the like system is kind of broken on film fiction, and broken in pretty much any system, because the way it works is if someone likes something, are they going to comment on it? Not necessarily. They're going to be like, hey, I liked it. And they're not necessarily going to hit that they liked it, because in their mind, they enjoyed the story. It wasn't bad. Meanwhile, everybody who's like, this story was terrible, are going to hit the thumbs down button. And you're going to have, so the people who like the story may not necessarily realize that they need to like this, give the story a thumbs up for people to realize that people like the story, while people who hate the story are going to automatically hit the thumbs down button. And then, of course, there's going to be the people who are jerks out there who are like, oh, this story is dark. I don't like dark. I'm going to hit the down button without even reading it. And there are people like that too, and they're jerks. Nobody likes them. Nobody wants them, but they exist, and we have to deal with them. And so, like I said, it can be discouraging when you look at your story, and it's like, it has a decent amount of upvotes, but it's not a great number. And so, maybe you expected more out of it. And so you're like, what? Like I said, if I can get 25 plus likes, I'll do more. Although, granted, it's going to probably be some time. Why? Because I would like to add more chapters to my other story, Ask Graceful Thread. And then there are other writing projects I would like to work on. And there are even reading projects that I'm trying to finish. And then life gets in the way and I get distracted and all that crazy garbage. So that's it for now. That's the Let's Talk for today. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all, liked it. Admittedly, it's kind of a hard, kind of a hard, a pain to do this stuff now because YouTube's a jerk and is like, hey, you don't have 1,000 viewers, so guess what? You can't monetize anything anymore. But oh well. So yeah, that's it for now. Thank you all for participating in this Let's Talk. I hope to hear from you all later.